Hey everybody, welcome to the video. So I'm breaking down the Monday Night Football showdown slate between the New Orleans Saints and the Seattle Seahawks. And will probably not be that great of a game. Only a 42-point over-under here. Jameis Winston versus Geno Smith. Not a whole lot to be excited about here. Not a lot of offensive pieces. But it's still football nonetheless, so I'm excited to break it down. But I'm not really looking forward to this game too much. We've definitely seen some better primetime games this year. But if you do find this video helpful in any way possible, make sure you leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you want to take that one step further, an official member over on Patreon. Link is down below in the description for that. Spreadsheets, projections, cheat sheets, Discord community, optimizers, ownership projections, which I personally use each and every single showdown slate, which I've taken on multiple showdown tournaments so far this year. Use my own personal group settings. So if you want to try it out, link is down below for that. For all sports, not just the NFL. And last but not least, this video is sponsored by PrizePicks. I'm sure most of you know what it is by now, but if you don't, it's daily fantasy sports simplified, just you versus the projections. There's no sharks, 150 max contests or salary cap restrictions or anything like that. Just you versus the props they offer each and every single day. And as of right now, if you're new sign over there, you can get a free money bonus. That's an instant deposit match up to $100, so it's free money. Want to use it to your advantage when you use code CPEN and tell them I sent you. But I think they'd be it for the plugs for the most part. So without further ado, let's dive into today's video. And as always, we'll start with the quarterback position, and it's an ugly one to talk about. I really can't make many great cases for either guy, but since it's a showdown slate, we have to have some interest here because we don't have any other options. I mean, the offensive pieces on the slate are just really gross outside of Alvin Kamara and the quarterbacks, and even then the quarterbacks don't look that great. So, we're kind of stuck. Yes, there's DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, but they have Geno Smith throwing the football, which is obviously a big downgrade from Russell Wilson. If Russell Wilson's playing this game, yeah, it wouldn't be too bad, but it's unfortunately not the case here. But we'll start with Winston here, just below $12,000. Seems a bit expensive, but he gets a pretty good matchup here versus Seattle, who is currently 24th DVA versus the pass this season, and 19th versus quarterbacks laying over 300 passing yards per game. The thing is, the Saints don't really have too much passing volume. They're only throwing the ball around 20 times per game, which is extremely low. He does have 2.5 passing touchdowns per game nearly, but only 178 passing yards per game, so there's not a lot to go around for the receiving options for the Saints here. They do have the higher implied team total. They're playing on the road, though, but they play super slow. 31 seconds per play, which is one of the lowest in the entire league. The thing is, looking at the slate, I mean, Jameis Winston is one of the highest projected players just because there's not many great options outside of Alvin Kamara. Alvin Kamara, by far the best player on the slate, definitely the highest projected by a good chunk, but Jameis Winston is right there below him. So yeah, you gotta have some interest in Jameis Winston. You guys know me, I'm not a huge fan of captaining quarterbacks. I'd much rather get their pass catching options or running backs or whoever it may be. Don't really ever captain defenses or kickers much, maybe like 1% max. But Jameis Winston, I mean, there's just not many great options, so I might go above my usual 10%. Just depends on the slate, really, because there's sometimes where I'll go like a 25% Josh Allen, the captain spot, or like a 30% Jalen Hurts. I know one slate I went like 60 to 70% Lamar Jackson, the captain spot. It just depends on how the slate landscape looks. I'm not going to go super heavy on Jameis Winston or anything. Probably like an absolute max of 10 to 15% in the captain spot, but he is one of the better projected players. I know he's super expensive though, so I'm not sure exactly how easy he's going to fit, but we'll have to wait and see. Geno Smith, $9,400. Not a bad price point, to be honest. The matchup is not very good versus the Saints, though. They have had a stingy defense so far this season. They currently are like 9th DVA versus the pass, and allowing the 5th fewest points per game to the quarterback position. He has great weapons to get the ball to in Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. The problem is he's just not that great of a quarterback. His one full start this year was last week versus Pittsburgh. 209 passing yards, got into the end zone. But it's really nothing too pretty here. But he's a fine flex play. Yes, I will have some captain ownership, but probably not more than 10% from Geno Smith tonight. But his price is pretty appealing, being over $2,000 cheaper than Jameis Winston, when they probably have somewhat similar upside. Then moving on to our lineup, like I said, I will have some captain quarterback lineups, but that's not the route I want to go in this video. So we're just going to plug both in the flex spot as for right now. So Jameis Winston, feels gross playing him at nearly $12,000. I'm going to be honest, my projections, I don't really like him that much. Like, I am projected for like 16, 17 points, which is fine on this slate, but I'm not super excited about him. Point per otherwise, he doesn't grade out too well on this slate, but it doesn't really matter too much. And then Geno Smith, we're going to plug him in as well, only $9,400. Matchup versus New Orleans is pretty gross, but he's a quarterback below $9,500 in a showdown slate, so we got to at least have some interest. And if you're playing cash games, you're probably going to get both quarterbacks in. He's not that bad of a price point either, so that leaves us $7,200 for our last remaining 4 spots, but one including a captain. So we'll definitely have to try to find some value on the slate, but I think we can make it work. Then moving on to the running back position, we'll start with the Saints first, and it's pretty much just the Alvin Kamara show. I believe Ozigbo saw like 12% of the snaps last time out in week 5, but I mean, that's just nothing really too important there. But Alvin Kamara, he is the man. He's going to see the most volume on the slate. He's by far the most expensive player, $1,000 more than Jameis Winston, but it matches in projections. I have him for like 6 to 8 points higher than everybody else in the slate, and when that's the case, kind of reminds me of the Lamar Jackson slate when they were facing the Colts, where I had him higher than pretty much everybody else. That game ended up turning into a shootout. There was multiple viable plays, but I mean, Lamar Jackson was the guy that I won like 60 to 70% in the captain spot. pretty much locked him at like 100% Lamar Jackson this slate. Ended up working out. Now, that's not to say I can't burn you sometimes, but I have a really hard time saving Alvin Kamara not being the optimal lineup on this slate. Like, I do not mind at all being pretty much all in here. He's going to get the most volume, nearly 19 carries per game, 73 rushing yards. He gets around 4.5 targets per game, which is close to a 20% target share. Those numbers are down in season past, but they just don't really throw the ball too much. Like, if you're only throwing the ball 20 times per game, there's only so many targets to go around, especially for a running back. But Alvin Kamara, definitely the best player in this game. The Seahawks are 16th DVA versus the run, but they're allowing the 4th most points per game to the running back position, over 31 points per game, 120 rushing yards, and 60 receiving yards, which is Alvin Kamara's bread and butter. So, yeah, I'm pretty much going to be all in Kamara here, and definitely my favorite captain by a long shot. And then as for the Seahawks backfield, this is probably a good one to stay away from. I'm not saying I won't play these guys in 150 max tournaments, but if you guys are building like single entry or 3 max, it's kind of hard to get to any of these Seahawks running backs because it's going to be an absolute mess here. Like, looking at snap distribution last week, Alex Collins, they get hurt later on. But Collins saw around 60% of the snaps, DJ Dallas around 30%, Travis Homer close to 10%. But now we have Rashad Penny back, so we pretty much have like a 4-man show here of Alex Collins, Rashad Penny, DJ Dallas, and Travis Homer. I imagine it's going to be a bit of a split between Rashad Penny and Alex Collins, and then DJ Dallas will probably get some passing down work, and then Travis Homer might get filtered out, but he might see a few snaps here and there. So I'm not really sure how much I would really want to mess with a 4-man show here. Plus, it's a brutal matchup versus New Orleans anyway. They've had a good run defense for years, but currently they are 2nd DVA versus the run, only allowing 55 rushing yards per game and 41 receiving yards, and they're allowing the 8th fewest points per game to the running back position. So having a hard time really liking any of these Seattle running backs. One of them might pop off, but it's going to be kind of hard to predict what's going to happen unless you're building 150 lineups and you have the ability to hedge your bets by sprinkling these guys here and there. But if I'm building one lineup, I'd have a hard time landing on either one of them. Then moving on to our lineup, like I said, I love Alvin Kamara on this slate. If you guys are playing cash games or single entries, you're pretty much going to want to go with Alvin Kamara in the catch. That's why he's going to be so high on there, and he can easily burn you if you don't have him. Even if he does bust, I just have a hard time seeing him bust like super hard where he kills you on this slate. But he's going to be so high owned where it's not going to really matter too much anyway. So I want as much Alvin Kamara as possible. And for this lineup, we're going to plug him in the captain spot. I know he's close to $20,000, but I think we have to find a way to make it work. I know we only have $3,200 left for the remaining players. Maybe we have to take out one of these quarterbacks, but I think there's enough value to be able to make this work, although it might not look too pretty, so we might take out one of the quarterbacks. If we have to take out Jameis Winston, we can take out Jameis Winston. Moving on to the wide receiver position, we'll start with the Seahawks first because they have the most expensive guys here. DK Metcalf at $10,000, Tyler Lockett at $9,000. You have the wide receiver 3, Freddie Swain at a decent price point at $2,000. Then you have Penny Hart at $600. Looking at stat distribution last week, Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf pretty much played the entire game. Freddie Swain close to 80% of the snaps. Penny Hart close to 20%. That's kind of it for the guys getting snaps for the most part. The problem is these guys are kind of priced like Russell Wilson's the quarterback. Like, if we're looking at their numbers last week, yeah, Metcalf had 7 targets, but they were 6 catches for 58 yards, did not find the end zone. Tyler Lockett didn't even have a catch till like the very end of the game, ended up with, I want to say, like 35 or some 50 yards, I don't know, something around there, but he only had 2 catches, wasn't really an impressive day. So these are some pretty stiff price points. DK Metcalf, probably see a lot of Marshawn Lattimore in this game, which is not my, obviously, favorite matchup, so Tyler Lockett could get a bit of a softer spot here, but I don't know, Tyler Lockett's one of those guys that you can't really count on too much, especially without Russell Wilson throwing him rainbow balls down the field for long touchdowns. So I'm not really a big fan of either of these wide receivers. DK Metcalf, I have projected for like the 3rd highest guy in the slate, which is, it's fine at $10,000. But like, I know these guys are both super talented. DK Metcalf's one of the best wide receivers in football. The problem is you gotta have a good quarterback getting the ball. That's certainly not the case here. I mean, the Saints are 9th DVA versus the pass, but they're 20th versus wide receivers, allowing nearly 200 receiving yards per game. So the matchup for them specifically is pretty good, but they're quite expensive, and I just hate the quarterback that's getting the football. Their ceilings are just really, really capped with Geno Smith under center. And then Freddie Swain down here at $2,000. He had 3 targets last week, but he got 2 of them for -4 yards. So it's like, where do we really want to go? Penny Hart down here at $600, really just hoping for a target. If it gets a target, gets like a 37-yard catch, yeah, that's not bad at $600, but he's definitely not going to win you a tournament unless he probably finds the end zone or just has a huge game yardage-wise out of the blue. But he doesn't really get enough snaps for that to be too much of a reliable option. Then moving on to the Saints here, it gets pretty gross because Chris Hogan retired and Deontay Harris is out, so it eliminates some of the few passing options we had on the Saints. So we're basically left with Marquez Callaway, Kenny Stills, and Ty Montgomery. Looking at snap distribution in Week 5, Callaway pretty much played the entire game. Kenny Stills played on over 70% of the snaps, which is pretty nice at $1,600. And Ty Montgomery played around 50% of the snaps. And with those guys being out, it's going to be even more concentrated to those 3. Callaway is the guy you would want, but honestly, projection-wise, Kenny Stills is really popping for me. I know he's only averaging around 2.5 targets per game, but he played on nearly 70% of the snaps last week. Like, he should be getting a handful of targets in this game, and he's only $1,600. And this is a good matchup versus Seattle. So far this season, they're 25th versus wide receivers and 24th EV versus the pass line, nearly 200 receiving yards per game, and a receiving touchdown, just 2 wide receivers. I know there's not too much passing volume in this offense, but Kenny Stills, I would expect to be one of the highest owned players in the entire slate because he allows you to make things fit up top. Like if you want to get 2 quarterbacks in, you want to fit Alvin Kamara in the captain spot, we have to find some value in Kenny Stills. He's going to be in the field a lot. He should get some targets. And he's not a bad player. We've used Kenny Stills in the past before. Like the guy's not a bad wide receiver, so we know he can do it. So I like Kenny Stills a lot in this slate. Ty Montgomery's playing $800. Not going to be a big air yards guy or anything, but he could get some short yardage work, which can kind of rack up points at $800 on a PPR site like DraftKings. But I really do like Kenny Stills at this price a lot. Then moving over to our lineup, we only have $3,200 left per player. So, like, yeah, Callaway would be the highest projected wide receiver for the Saints, or yeah, DK Metcalf or Tyler Lockett. I'd love to fit those guys in. But if we try to fit those guys in, like let's just say we're going to plug in Tyler Lockett, that's $300 left per player remaining. Like that's just not going to work. Yes, there's $200 players, but we're not going to do that. So let's just plug in Kenny Stills at $1,600. I think he's one of the best value plays, if not the best value play on the entire slate here. Looking at his numbers last week, when he played over 70% of the snaps, he had 5 targets. Didn't do too much with them. 2 catches for 17 yards, 3.8 fantasy points. But if he's going to see similar volume, maybe even a little bit more with Deontay Harris and Chris Hogan being out, hard not to like him at that price point. So if we plug him in, that leaves us $4,000 for the remaining spots. And since we have tight ends, defenses, and kickers to talk about, I will wait to fill the rest of this lineup out after. And moving on to the tight end position, it's not a whole lot to be excited about, but we'll start with the Seahawks first here. Pretty much a 2-man show between Gerald Everett and Will Dissly. Dissly played around 70% of the snaps last week. Gerald Everett just under 50%. $1,000 price tag difference when they're pretty much the same exact play. So I guess I'll lean towards using Will Dissly over Gerald Everett, but you're kind of just splitting hairs there. But I'll just take that $1,000 discount, which could come quite in handy to get a better player in my lineup. Then moving into the Saints, we have Jawan Johnson at $2,200, Adam Troutman at $1,800. Then I guess Griffin, if you want to count him in there, doesn't really play too many snaps. Troutman plays the majority of the snaps though. Jawan Johnson only played on 11% of the snaps last week. I feel like Troutman's the guy you'd want. I know Johnson has had a couple of touchdowns this year, but I mean, similar target numbers for Troutman. He's a little bit cheaper and he plays a lot more snaps. So I think Troutman's a fine cheap option. You just kind of have to hope he gets into the end zone because you would not be happy with the yardage output that he's going to give you. I mean, 12.8 yards per game, which is not too far off of Dissly Never, but they definitely have more of a ceiling there. Troutman just needs to catch like a goal line touchdown to make this work. But if you just want to take a couple shots on some Saints tight ends, hoping they find the end zone, they're definitely viable, but the volume is not going to be super high whatsoever. And as for the defenses, if I had to play one, I don't want to play defenses really on this slate because the Saints are just insanely priced at nearly $6,000. Like I would have some interest in the Saints defense if they weren't this expensive, but the chances that a $6,000 defense is optimal on the road in Seattle is probably pretty low, and I'm sure the field's going to be close to like 20% on the Saints defense here. I'll definitely be underweight. I'll probably put a max of 15% in my flex spot, maybe like 1% max in the captain spot. The Seahawks defense, it is Jameis Winston, so you can play some Seahawks defense, but I don't have too much interest in either defense here. I just feel like the Saints are way overpriced, and the Seahawks don't really love the matchup versus the Saints, although it's not like they're projected to get blown out or anything. 23.25 implied team total against them, and they're pretty cheap. If they get a couple Winston turnovers, maybe a pick 6 or something, it could work out, but I'm not really in the business of projecting defensive touchdowns. And as for the kickers, I guess that Will Lutz could get activated, although I'm not really sure they're going to want to activate him. I guess the weather's not supposed to be too great in Seattle, so maybe they want to push him out there to risk re-injury. But I don't know, we're just talking kickers. No matter who's the kicker for the Saints, they're going to be projected around 7 fantasy points. Not going to change too much for me, although Will Lutz is one of the better kickers of football, but I mean, it doesn't really make too much of a difference. So Jason Myers, Brian Johnson, these guys are fine floor plays, but their ceilings are quite capped because they're kickers. You know, they can't do too much out there besides get a couple field goals, but they are viable. But I do like a 1 to 2% max in the captain spot, and usually like around a 20% max in the flex spot. Then just to fill out the rest of this lineup, keep in mind, guys, these are not pre-built. Don't just take this and copy paste into our lineups. I'm just trying to see what fits. As we talked about the video, we have about $4,000 left per player, so I'm probably thinking like kicker range or one of those tight ends from Seattle. So we could go with like a Gerald Everett, maybe I don't think Brian Johnson would fit, would he? Yeah, we're just under that. If you want to go 2 tight end, you could do that. I mean, that's viable. They're probably only going to get like 2 or 3 targets apiece, though. So if you wanted to go more like a kicker and a tight end, you could use Will Dissly, and you're left with like a Jason Myers or a Brian Johnson or something like that. But I would leave that up to you. Use your imagination, whoever you want to fit at the end. But a couple ways we can go in this slate. Alvin Kamara definitely would be the most popular captain, but if you want to get crazy, just go with somebody else is definitely going to be somewhat contrarian on this slate. Really, if you want to do something fun and do like a Kenny Stills in the captain spot, that could probably get really interesting. So I actually want to see what that looks like. So like $2,400 for a guy that should see like maybe like 5 to 7 targets in this game. Obviously, we want Kamara. We want both quarterbacks probably. Maybe we can fit in a DK Metcalf. We can. We could actually throw in a kicker at the end. So you can do a whole bunch of things, or even a Will Dissly, $3,400. So Kenny Stills the captain. Obviously, not quite the ceiling that Alvin Kamara has, but it gets you Kamara, both quarterbacks, DK Metcalf, and a Will Dissly. So, like I said, a couple ways you can go. But with that being said, that'll be it for the video. So I hope it was helpful, and if it was, make sure you leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet already. If you want to take that one step further, an official member over on Patreon. Link is down below in the description for that. Spreadsheets, optimizers, ownership projections, cheat sheets, Discord me, all that fun stuff. Link can be found down below. And don't forget, this video was sponsored by Prize Picks, just you versus the projections. And as of right now, if you're new, sign over there, you can get a free money bonus. Instant deposit match up to $100, so it's free money. Want to use it to your advantage when you use code CPEN and tell them I sent you. That'll be it. Hope you guys enjoyed the game as much as you can tonight, and I wish you all the best of luck.